Hey there, mech pilots. Strap into your cockpit and get ready to dive into the steel-clad history of one of gaming's most exciting mech franchises. We're heading back to the mid-90s, where a relatively unknown Japanese studio named FromSoftware is about to launch a game that would pave the way for their first flagship franchise and solidify their reputation as an excellent developer in the video game industry. Today, we're not just exploring the complex mechanics and explosive battles of Armored Core, but also the fascinating history of From Software itself. So tighten those bolts and calibrate your targeting systems, and join us as we take a mechanized trip down memory card lane. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope these words find you well. Hello and welcome to the 202nd episode of our video game history podcast, A Trip Down Memory Card Lane. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game or the people that have created it. It can be about a console or the technology that brought it to life. We often talk about the companies that bring it all together, making our hobby a reality. While telling you each story, we hope to teach you something new about the topic, what it took from the world as its inspiration, or what it gave back to the world in its legacy. Today, we are diving into the exciting world of Armored Core, a game that was first released on July 10th, 1997. I'm David Casson, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, who is still trying to figure out how to install a laser cannon on his lawnmower. He's my brother, Rob Casson. Rob, how's your progress going on that project?
Well, the mount is the easy part, but it's finding the power to actually get the laser to work.
Yeah, that's the truth.
So,
Guessing a lawnmower doesn't exactly have the power for a decent laser.
I mean, if I built it like Tim Allen, maybe.
Valid point. That is a very, very valid point. All right, well, today we're taking a look at Armored Core. Do you have any familiarity with the Armored Core series?
I believe I do. It's either that or a different mech series.
No, it definitely is a mech series. We're also going to take a look at the early history of From Software. I think you know them.
No. Who's From Software?
No, who's From Software? You have no idea.
Didn't they make that game like David Ring?
David Ring. I was gonna be like McDonald's rings or something like that. That's funny.
No, I mean, yeah, I've been with the DLC drop. I've been putting a little time back into Elden Ring. So
Really?
Oh yeah.
We still got to play it with that mod.
I don't know what mod you're talking, but we'll figure
The
it
seamless co-op mod.
out. I don't remember.
The one that lets you play co-op outside of the boss fights.
I don't remember, but we'll figure it out.
Okay. Well, before we move on to the fantastic world of Armored Core, what else has happened today in gaming history?
Well, kicking it off on July 13th, 1987, Metal Gear was released for the MSX2 home computer, developed by Konami and directed by Hideo Kojima. This game is notable for introducing the stealth genre to the gaming world, emphasizing evasion and strategy over direct combat. Players control Solid Snake, a rookie operative of the elite Special Forces unit Foxhound, tasked with infiltrating a heavily fortified enemy base to destroy a weapon known as Metal Gear, which is a bipedal tank capable of launching nuclear missiles. Metal Gear was praised for its innovative gameplay mechanics, complex narrative, and the strategic depth it required from players. This title laid the foundation for what would become one of the most influential and enduring franchises in video game history, known for its intricate plots and groundbreaking design. And we learned about its history and the early career of Hideo Kojima back in episode 98. So if you want to learn more, go give it a listen.
Yeah, he's crazy, but we like him.
Indeed. Make some good stuff.
Metal Gear was a good game, and it spawned Metal Gear Solid, which is arguably the influential part series. So,
Well, tomato.
that's it.
On July 7th, 2000, Sony released the PS1, which was a redesigned compact version of the original PlayStation console. This smaller and more portable iteration maintained full compatibility with the PlayStation's extensive library of games and peripherals, offering the same gaming experience in a more convenient and modern form factor. The PS1's sleek design and reduced size made it an attractive option for gamers, contributing to the continued popularity of the PlayStation brand. Its release came at a time when Sony was gearing up for the launch of the PlayStation 2, allowing the company to capture a wider audience by offering a more affordable and space efficient version of its groundbreaking console, and subsequently started the trend of PlayStation releasing an original and a slim version up until the 4.
You beat me to it. It's very true. Do you remember the PS1 at all? Did you ever have one, or was it just the original one in the house? I don't remember.
I can't remember if we had a slim, but I definitely know that a friend of mine had the slim. I
I'm
remember
pretty
the
sure we
original
had a.
very well. We might have had a slim. I know we had a PlayStation 2 and a PlayStation Slim, 2 Slim rather, but that's about the last of the PlayStations that I remember having. I
Gotcha.
never got a 3 or 4 or 5, so
Right.
yeah. On July 12th, 2004, Bethesda Softworks licensed the rights to the Fallout franchise from Interplay Entertainment to develop and publish Fallout 3. This agreement marked a significant turning point for the beloved post apocalyptic RPG series, which had garnered a dedicated fan base with its first two installments developed by Interplay. Bethesda, known for the successful Elder Scrolls series, aimed to bring its expertise in open world game design to the Fallout universe. The development of Fallout 3 by Bethesda was highly anticipated, promising to revitalize the series with advanced graphics, a deep narrative, and immersive gameplay. The eventual release of Fallout 3 in 2008 was met with critical acclaim, successfully blending Bethesda's open world mechanics with the unique atmosphere and storytelling of the Fallout franchise. And it helped to solidify the series' place as a major player in the RPG genre. And, for those that don't know, we learned about the beginnings of the Fallout franchise back in episode 111, so give it a listen if you're interested.
Yeah. A lot of people started out at Fallout 3, don't know Fallout 1 or 2.
No, they do not. The isometric gold.
That's right, the isometrical. They were excellent games. Excellent games.
Indeed. I have
Probably
them ready to play on my Steam.
still some of the best storytelling in the Fallout franchise, even to this day.
Well, I'll take your word for it because I'm still not that much into it.
That's it.
On July 12th, 2011, Electronic Arts, also known as EA, acquired PopCap Games, a move that significantly expanded EA's portfolio in the casual and mobile gaming markets. PopCap, renowned for creating immensely popular games such as Bejeweled, Plants vs. Zombies, and Peggle, brought a wealth of successful titles and development expertise to EA. The acquisition, valued at over $750 million, was part of EA's strategic push to strengthen its presence in the rapidly growing casual gaming sector. PopCap's innovative and addictive games had already garnered a massive dedicated player base, and under EA's umbrella, they aimed to reach even wider audiences. This acquisition allowed EA to leverage PopCap's creativity and establish franchises, enhancing its offerings across multiple platforms, including mobile, social media, and traditional gaming consoles.
I'm a big Peggle fan. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, 100%. Peggle is fantastic, especially when you play it with AIs that yell at you and say mean things.
They have that?
Uh, Go check
Yeah.
out Doug Doug.
Doug.
Oh, Doug Doug is a very big fan of Peggle.
Okay. Deal.
And Doug Doug just happens to be the brother of the creator of a pretty cool game series we talked about.
That's right. You right. I remember now. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last up for this week in gaming history, on July 7th, 2015, Psyonix released Rocket League, a unique blend of soccer and vehicular acrobatics that quickly became a sensation. The game features rocket powered cars that players use to hit a giant ball into the opponent's goal, combining fast paced action with strategic gameplay. Rocket League was praised for its simple yet addictive mechanics, intuitive controls, and competitive multiplayer modes. Its success was further fueled by a strong online community and continuous updates from the developers, including new game modes, customizable items, season events, and maps. The game's innovative concept and engaging gameplay has earned it numerous awards and a lasting place in the esports and gaming communities. And we talked about it back in episode 45. So if you're interested in learning about the history of Rocket League, go check it out.
Yeah, we had
Yeah, do the
friends.
thing. And with that, Dave, I think it's time we get into today's topic.
Yes, let's get into today's topic. Natoshi Zen founded From Software on November 1st, 1986. Like so many other developers that we have discussed who all kind of started out in this early years of gaming, the 70s and 80s, From Software was originally a developer of business software, like accounting software and other productivity titles. And we've seen that a bunch, right? Like we learned that wasn't Square originally the software branch of an electric company, and then we learned that shoot, uh, the guys Infocom, the guys who made Zork, tried their luck at business software, didn't work so well. Activision got into business software, didn't work so well. So, when computers were first starting, all these companies thought that the business side and office software was really going to be where the money was, and so that's where a lot of companies got their start back then.
Yeah, but look how that all turned out.
I know, right? So they're making all this business software, and there's custom orders, and in between customers' orders, they would have downtime with nothing to do. And so instead of sitting around doing nothing, they would use the downtime to just randomly mess around on the computer developing games. Nothing of note, nothing in particular. They just would flex their programming chops on making random games for personal computers. And it was about when the fifth generation of consoles were getting ready to come out. The PlayStation and Neo Geo, the Saturn, the N64. That the company decided that it wanted to really jump into game development because it looked like it was going to be the next big thing, right? The upcoming thing. It was increasing in popularity. We saw that starting with Nintendo through SNES, and here we're moving into the 3D realm, and they're like, "Yep, it's time to get on." You know, with their downtime, they had been messing around with game development, and they had actually planned a game out. They did plan one game out. It was a dungeon crawling game. It featured 3D CGI graphics, and the concept was that there were robots that were having to navigate an underground labyrinth. But they didn't push forward with that project because they felt that there were no computers available to them at the time that could handle the scope of what they had in their mind. And we've heard that before. There's companies that have shelved products and then brought them back at a later date when the technology finally caught up with them. There's a lot of games with that type of pedigree, right? So instead, From Software, they decided that they weren't going to go with computers, that they wanted to look at that upcoming generation of consoles. They refined their idea to focus more, away from dungeon crawling and the 3D graphics. They wanted to focus more on first person exploration. And so they looked at all the consoles and they chose a platform. They chose the PlayStation because out of all the platforms they looked at, the Sony PlayStation had the highest technical specifications out of all the choices they considered. Uh, the Neo Geo was definitely a better, beefier system. So I don't know how they came to that conclusion. So maybe it wasn't just highest specs, even though that's what I read. It's probably a fine middle ground between cost and specs.
Dollar sign, dollar sign.
Dollar sign, dollar sign. But up until that point, they had really only been making games for 16-bit PCs. They hadn't done anything with 3D or hadn't worked with polygons or anything because that just wasn't in their wheelhouse. So they sat down and they said, okay, cool. The whole hook to the Sony PlayStation is 3D polygons. What type of game would be well suited to the polygon ability of the PlayStation? And so they went back to where they got the idea for that dungeon crawling game with 3D graphics from. And that was a result of them playing Wizardry a lot.
Whoa, hold on. We talked about that one before. I
Yes,
think it was episode 106.
it was. Yes.
Wasn't that created in 1981? It
Mm-hmm,
was one of the first Dungeons and Dragons role playing games written for computer.
mm-hmm.
One of the first true party based role playing games,
True.
and was among the first role playing games to offer color graphics.
That is all true. Thank you for listening to our podcast episodes.
Yeah, you should too.
I should too, yeah. As should our listeners, no doubt. That was a good plug. It is, as we've talked about it before, because it's come up in multiple episodes, it is one of the pillars of the role playing genre. Many game developers have cited Wizardry as one of their influences. And so here we are again with the game developer having another go at recreating Wizardry. And so inspired by that game, FromSoftware's first game ended up being a first-person action role-playing game called Kingsfield. In Kingsfield, you, as the player, navigate an underground labyrinth, so they brought that idea back, trying to discover the source of an invasion of monsters. Now, Kingsfield, as a name, is the name they took from a golf course. No joke. They learned that there was a golf course called Kingsfield and said, "Hey, that's a cool name. We're going to use that." And the rest is history. The game Kingsfield is rendered in real-time 3D graphics. It is therefore one of the earliest known 3D console role-playing video games. So there was a team of about 10 people at FromSoftware that developed Kingsfield over the course of a little less than 6 months. It was done in about 5 months. And Kingsfield was released in Japan on December 16th, 1994. So that's when FromSoftware finally got into the video game business. It was a commercial success. It got mixed reviews critically, but people liked it. I mean, it definitely had the benefit of being new, right? One of the earliest 3D graphic role-playing games, so people bought it on the curiosity of that. There wasn't a lot of competition because it was so early on in the life of the PlayStation. So, for a lot of reasons, it sold. And so it was commercially successful. And of course, when you have a video game that is commercially successful, video game companies tend to want to do what, Rob?
Make money?
Make more money. So, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. FromSoftware decides that they want to continue the series. So the team gets back together. 8 months later, in July of 1995, they release Kingsfield 2 in Japan. Now, Kingsfield 2 did eventually make it outside of Japan. The first one was only released in Japan, but Kingsfield 2 made it to North American and European soil. But because there was no Kingsfield 1 released over here, Japan's Kingsfield 2 is Kingsfield 1 here in the United States and Europe. And it sold. So again, let's make more money. And so, as you can guess, they made a third one. Japan got Kingsfield 3. North America and Europe got Kingsfield 2. They've still never re-released the first Kingsfield here in the States, although there is a fan translation that's said to be really great if you'd like to play it. So, FromSoftware got their start as a video game developer by making a role-playing series known as Kingsfield. Have you ever tripped on that before, Rob?
No, Dave, I can't say I have.
Yeah, me either. I don't remember it in any way, shape, or form. But while there was a team making Kingsfield, there was another team that was looking to make something completely different. Because when they were deciding to get into the PlayStation, they were looking at a bunch of different things. And so the idea to create Armored Core, the idea to create a mech fighting game, really existed even before Kingsfield was released to the world. It really, even if you look to FromSoftware's earliest idea, having robots navigating a labyrinth, their idea of playing around with robots, so to speak, goes to the very beginnings of when they thought they were even going to get into video games, period. So they had this idea that they knew they wanted to make a robot or mech fighting game, but they had no experience with that whatsoever. I mean, to be fair, they didn't have any experience with video games or any of that whatsoever. But in anticipation of this, of knowing they wanted to create a mech fighting game, they, even before there was a PlayStation, that's how far back this goes, the team at From Software reached out to renowned mech designer Shoji Kawamori. So Kawamori is best known for creating the Macross series. Macross was the basis for the Robotech franchise, and he also created the Diaclone toy line, which is the basis for the Transformer line of toys here in the United States. So he is responsible for essentially two of at least the like introducing that concept to United States in a lot of ways. Robotech is where a lot of people here stateside got into the concept of mechs. And of course Transformers is probably the from the popular culture standpoint, like the basis for all of that, right?
Yeah,
I don't
I'd
think
say
there's
so.
I would argue I don't think there's any mech anything more popular than Transformers at this point, to be fair.
Yeah, I don't think there is.
Now, that's not all Kawamori did. He has a very impressive list of design credits. He got his start, actually, we've talked about it before in Battleship Yamato, which we talked about in other episodes, Influence. He wasn't credited in that movie, but he has a mech design uncredited in that. But he has lots of he has worked in lots of other things you may know. He has a design credit in Ghost in the Shell. He has a design credit for Mobile Suit Gundam. He has a design credit for the Ultraman. And since we're talking about video games here, he's touched other video game franchises too. He was a guest designer in one of the Ace Combat games. He worked
Nice.
on Mech Warrior 3050.
That's
And
it, Mech Warrior. That's the ones that I played.
gotcha. And then Rob, he even designed the robot arms known as Devil Breakers and Devil May Cry
No
5.
shit. Wow.
So
Okay.
the robot arms, the Devil Breakers themselves were all designed specifically by Shoji. So at the time, all they really brought to him was that they wanted to build a game that included player designed modular mechs, right? They knew they wanted to create a game around mech fighting, and they wanted to give players a chance to customize their mechs, to design their own mechs, and then be able to take them into an arena or some environment and fight them. That was the initial pitch to Kawamori. Kawamori sat down with that concept and he thought to himself that too much freedom on the player's behalf was really going to hinder the ability of the team to create a consistent visual identity for the game. So what he did is he proposed the concept of what he called armored cores. They were a system in which the modular concept would stay, but it revolved around a core that contained the cockpit, the engine, joint connectors for legs, arms, weapon connectors, so on and so forth. Now the team at From Software liked this idea, not surprisingly. They adopted it as the official concept for how they would build their mechs in the game, and obviously they liked it so much that the notion of Armored Core became the name of the game itself. Now, their first ideas of the game, the first version of the game, really didn't resemble where they landed in the end. Armored Core is a mission based game where you go on missions and earn money to buy parts for your core, rinse and repeat. Originally, though, they had wanted to make more of an adventure type game, an open world without loading screens, lots of freedom, a big world that you could explore. That was that was where they started. They brought one of the programmers over from the Kingsfield team to develop this early concept, and he sat down and they developed an early prototype of it. But the development of Armored Core is very much one of trial and error. And through this development process, as well as the development process of Kingsfield itself, the team learned what they could and couldn't do, right? Because they're working on a brand new platform. The PlayStation was new to everyone at the time, to be fair. And always, as we've looked before, what something looks like on paper, you can't always pull all of that power out of a new system when you don't quite know how to use it. So, I mean, to be fair, the development of a lot of games when a system first comes out is trial and error.
Right.
So, yeah, so they worked through trial and error, and this open concept, as they fleshed it out, was really just deemed too much. And that initial concept was completely scrapped. It was basically trashed, and the team decided that they were going to start from scratch um, to build a game. Not only did they scrap that, they coded that off of what they had done in Kingsfield. To be fair, and when they scrapped that early version of the game, the Kingsfield prototype, they scrapped everything. They basically started rebuilding a new engine from the ground up. Um, so it wasn't just that they're like, let's get rid of the prototype. By making that prototype, they realized that it wasn't going to do what they wanted to do, and they had to start from scratch. So, and as they built that engine and built the game around it, the team really found itself having to balance hardware limitations with the gameplay balance and all the artistic design choices that they wanted. Um, Now they did have a lot of support. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we also have Sony to thank for Armored Core. We've talked about in various episodes about how Sony was really trying to reach out to all the game developers when they were making the PlayStation. They brought experimental designers and developers into the fold, such as those that worked in Division Zero. We talked about that in our episode on Parappa the Rappa. They pushed really hard for established studios to produce content for the PlayStation. We talked about that when we covered the history of Final Fantasy VII. It was literally a coup when Square decided to develop that game for the PlayStation, because prior to that, Square was a hardcore Nintendo studio. To ensure the success of the PlayStation, Sony was really keen on throwing money at studios. The little studios and the internal studios. We learn in our episode on Twisted Metal that they treated the early days of game development like they were a music label, right? They found a talented person that they really had faith in, and they built teams around him and threw money, right? And on top of that, Sony also really threw money around at little third party studios. They were really bound and determined to see through the success of the PlayStation. And From Software was one of the little third party studios that really benefited from that. They got the blessing and the financial backing of Sony. And so they didn't really have to worry about paying their bills, so to speak, as they developed Armored Core. So that meant that they could take their time, so to speak. I mean, not forever, but take their time. So when it got to this point and they had to rebuild from scratch, they were really able to put time and care into it. In fact, they spent the better part of a whole year working on the engine for Armored Core alone. And of course, they built out the rest of the game around their engine with their customization and their missions and their story and so on and so forth. And they released the game on July 10th, 1997, finishing up what ended up being for them and an incredibly rewarding process. Rob, do you know what else is a complex but incredibly rewarding process?
What's that, Dave?
Podcasting. If you've ever considered starting your own podcast, listeners, but didn't know where to begin, our friends at Zencastr have got you covered. Zencastr offers an all-in-one podcasting suite of tools that makes it easier than ever to create your own high-quality podcasts.
With Zencastr, it's super easy to record a podcast. Everyone logs in using their web browser, and you can start recording right away. It even allows you to record up to 4K video with your guests, and with Zencastr's multi-layered backups, you always have the highest quality recordings, even if someone has a unstable connection.
And the best part, Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes all those ums and ahs, eliminates awkward pauses. You can set the right podcast loudness and reduce background noise with just the click of a button.
So, if you'd like to start your own podcast or take your current podcast to the next level, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use the code memorycardlane, all one word, for 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan.
Sign up for Zencastr today and experience the ease of producing your own high-quality podcast. Go out there and share your ideas with the world. So with the release of Armored Core, FromSoftware was, so to speak, sharing their new idea with the world. Armored Core is a 1997 third-person mech shooter. Basically, in it, you take on missions to engage enemies and earn credits. The missions take place in different environments. There are desert bases, there are space stations. They kind of stuck with the concept of open environments. It may not be an open world, but the levels are extremely open, uh, meaning that you have to look all around you for the enemies. And like many shooters of the time, with the customization, there was a lot of different ways you could customize your mech. There were different weapon types, guns, rocket launchers, lasers, missiles. If you were a melee person, you could don a giant sword, which is pretty cool. Pretty sure that's what I would have done because I'm lame like that. You basically defeat enemies, earn money to buy better gear for your mech, rinse and repeat. And as you get to higher missions, they get harder, but the pay gets better, so you can buy better gear and you rinse and repeat, so on and so forth. It was well received. It aggregate ranking is a 75, which I know isn't like the greatest, but I was well received enough. Lots of 7s, lots of 8s out of 10. GameSpot gave it an 8.3. IGN gave it an 8. People really liked how much you could customize your mechs. That was what everyone really liked. So, and it sold well. It sold well enough to start an entire series. So I had to do pretty good, huh?
I would probably say so, yeah.
I mean, that's not terrible. A couple years later, in 2000, they got Armored Core 2, which continued. Well, they ended up doing 2 expansions to Armored Core 1. Almost all of the games in the Armored Core series have expansions. As a side note, there was Project Phantasma and Master of Arena for the original Armored Core. And that trilogy gave way to Armored Core 2, which would continue the narrative of the original Armored Core series. Um, Armored Core 2. So the original Armored Core really takes place in a post-apocalyptic setting. The whole notion is that the Earth experiences like a cataclysm called the Great Destruction. Humanity gets forced underground, and then corporations begin fighting for dominance, which basically leads everyone to start relying on Armored Core pilots, which are called Ravens, and so on and so forth. And then Armored Core 2 basically expands out of post-apocalyptic because it includes colonization in Mars. So basically, we've done in with this world, so we're gonna go, colonize other planets now, right? And that did good. There was one expansion for Armored Core 2. So in 2002, we got Armored Core 3, which was technically a reboot for the franchise. They redid I don't need to tell you what a reboot is, right? They redid the series.
Oh, thanks. I actually didn't know.
I know. It got a few expansions. And then in 2006, you got Armored Core 4, in which they decided to reboot the series again. It got an expansion. In 2012, you got Armored Core 5, which did not reboot the franchise. Just side note, they actually did
Lame.
continue. I know, but wait. Just last year, almost a year ago, August 25th, 2023, we got Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. And it did, in fact, reboot the series again.
Did they set a Jeep Rubicon on fire?
They did not set a Jeep Rubicon on
Ah, come
fire.
on. That's a perfect way to set up that name.
I don't even think there is Jeep Rubicon in that game. It takes place I don't it's like an alternate future. It's like an alternate timeline. And Armored Core pilots are sent to a distant planet called Rubicon 3 to fight the same war, which is between
Ah, so
corporations.
where the Rubicon came from. Got it.
So they're all fighting off of a they're fighting for resources on a planet, basically is what it is. So
Makes sense.
there have been a few spin-offs that are like vehicular combat arena based games. They're not like customization, they're more like get in your mech and fight others in an arena style than a story based game. There were a couple of those along the way. um, and then of course they've added multiplayer capabilities through the time. Armored Core 2 had was the first in the series to have multiplayer in Japan, but online gaming wasn't really a thing anywhere else yet. So it really wasn't until Armored Core 4 that the series like had actual online gameplay and multiplayer, but then it stuck from there basically. But the Armored Core series has persisted, right? Um, it's persisted. You know, it got its start there in what year did I say it got its start? 1997, 97, 97.
Yes.
The topic today, July 10th, 1997. And here we are 26 years later, 27 years now, but 26 years later, they got a sixth game in the series. Still made by From Software, right? Still made by the same series.
I actually don't know if it still is.
It still is.
All right. There you
They
go.
have maintained the From Software series the whole time. But what you should know is that Armored Core solidified their reputation. It's hot in here, y'all. Our AC died. I am roasted in my office right now. Armored Core solidified From Software's reputation as a developer that can make mech games. So, in their history, you should know that they have made other games that were mech games that were not Armored Core titles.
What?
I
Shut
know,
up.
right? I mean, and they got right at it. They were making the expansions for Armored Core between 97 and 2000, but they also managed to make a multiplayer action game for the Dreamcast, another mecha fighting game called Frame Grid, or maybe Frame Gride. I think it's Frame Grid. In 2002, they were making Armored Core 3 by that point, but they also that year made their first Xbox title. It was a third person shooter based around mechs that was called Murakumo Renegade Mech Pursuit. They released that in July of 2002. In 2004, they made yet another third person shooter. This one was called Metal Wolf Chaos. That's a badass name, huh?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, Metal Wolf Chaos.
Kind of reminds me of Metal Gear Solid, though.
It kinda. In Metal Wolf Chaos, the player takes on the role of fictional United States President Michael Wilson, piloting a mech to battle the rebelling military led by fictional Vice President Richard Hawke.
Okay.
Despite being heavily rooted in American context and cultural references, Metal Wolf Chaos has never been released outside of Japan.
Boo.
It's cool too. Like the cover is a giant mech in front of a giant U.S. flag.
That's fantastic.
Metal Wolf Chaos does have a bit of a cult following because, as you might imagine, its sense of American patriotism is perhaps a little exaggerated. At least it was in 2004. It's probably spot on for American patriotism right now, let's be fair.
100%.
I could totally see some guy rocking out a giant flag in front of a mech nowadays and being like, America, what?
I'm sure it's already a thing.
I'm sure it is too. In 2005, they started another third person shooting franchise based around mechs. This one was called Ace, or Another Century's Episode. They've made a couple of those. Ace, Rob, you'd be interested to find out that Ace was actually directed by Yu Tanamura. He would later be the director of Dark Souls 2, the co-director of Dark Souls 3, and the co-director of Elden Ring, alongside your guy, which is what, Hidetaki Miyazaki, right? Our
Sure.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
Hidetaki Miyazaki.
are you
Miyazaki.
sure you're not thinking Shigeru Miyamoto?
No, I'm pretty sure it's Hidetaka Miyazaki. Pretty sure I got it right.
Mm.
Funny
Mm.
enough, Miyazaki, who's now best known for Dark Souls, as the creator of Dark Souls and everything. He's also now the creative director, designer, writer, and president of From Software.
Wow. That's a lot of
He
titles.
he actually got his start. He actually got his start on one of the expansions for Armored Core 3. His first game working for From Software was as a planner on Armored Core Last Raven, and then he became a director for Armored Core 4 and its sequel, or its expansion, Armored Core 4 Answer. I know, creative, right? And then after he was the director of the 4 Answer, he was the director of Demon's Souls, and the rest is history. He got his start in this story too.
Right on.
So basically, From Software has continued to work with mechs over the years, both in the sense that they've continued the Armored Core line and they've made other games that were mech based too. But of course, as we know, as we just said, From Software does not just make mech games and Dark Souls. There were other games too. Well, I mean, I got ahead of myself. They don't just make mech games, right? Um, the Kingsfield series, Rob, would eventually become Demon's Soul. Demon's Soul is said to be the spiritual successor to Kingsfield. And then, of course, we know that Demon's Souls would become the Dark Souls series. And then Dark Souls would eventually give way to their most recent game, which is
David Ring.
David Ring. Elden Ring. I get the joke now. That's depressing.
Oh, Dave.
They've made other games too. So they kind of have a thing as a role playing company, right? That's where they've kind of stayed the entire time because they made the Kingsfield series, and to be fair, Kingsfield as a series stayed around till I think they made Kingsfield 4 in 2001. I don't think that there was another one since then. They have had other series. In '98 they made an action role playing game called Shadow Tower, which has a lot of similarities to Kingsfield. And they have other games in there too. They early on made another role playing game called Eternal Ring. Funny, knowing now that they made Elden Ring, right?
Yeah, I
They
never
made
heard of
it.
that one.
They made an adventure series called Echo Knight. There's a couple of those. They made a role playing game called Lost Kingdoms for the GameCube. There are two Lost Kingdoms for the GameCube actually. So I mean, they kind of have had their Chrome Hounds. I missed Chrome Hounds. They made another mech game for the 360 called Chrome Hounds. So they've been dabbling in these two realms for a long, long time, right? You either have mech games or you have role playing games. And to be frank, they've been incredibly successful doing both of them. I mean, let's be honest. They're still making them. They're still going. Elden Ring is incredibly popular. I mean, heck, Dark Demon Souls started a whole genre. We now have a genre called Souls-like.
Yeah, very true.
So whenever a developer can say we created our own genre, that I think that pretty much cements them as something important in video game history.
A little bit.
So From Software has done a lot of things, and they're not going anywhere because we have Elden Ring and Armored Core 6 as their most recent games. So which is funny that their most recent game is an Armored Core, and here we are talking about it, like I said, 26 years, 27 years later. Right?
Right.
Right. Well, that's the history of Armored Core and the history of From Software. Really brief. It's hot in here. I don't have the patience to go into them more. I get my air conditioning fixed in a few days. I promise they'll get better.
Or not.
We've talked. That is so true. Oh my god, is that true? So we've talked about a lot of other games. There are a lot of other episodes that you can listen to based off this one. We referenced the Fallout episode. We referenced the Wizardry episode. We've referenced the Metal Gear episode, Rocket League. There were a lot of other things that we talked about in here. Parappa the Rapper and Final Fantasy. All really fantastic episodes. Better than this one, I promise. If you want to go check out any of those old episodes, of course, you can do so. We have our archives. You can get it wherever you listen to your podcast, or best of all, our recommendation is by going to our website at www.memorycardlane.com. Rob, what else can people do on our website?
You can find a calendar of our future episodes. You can find a link to our Discord where you can come chat with Dave and I. You can find a link to our Patreon where you can help support us, get access to ad-free and the unedited versions of all of our episodes. And you can find links to our social media where I am on several platforms as Rob_O_Raptor and Dave.
I can be found on various platforms as David is wrong. Each week, we'll tell you a story relevant to the current week in gaming history. It can be about a game, a console, a technology, a person. Just find a topic that's relevant to this week, and we turn it into a story to teach you. And one of the best parts about doing that is that when we sit down to research for new episodes, I basically just sit down and say, what can I learn this week? My assumption is that I don't know it. There's a good chance you don't know it either. I really love that whole cycle of learning and then teaching people new things. So in celebration of that cycle of learning and teaching, we like to go around and talk about what we take away from our episodes every week. So Rob, what did you learn this week?
Well, I think my big takeaway is that Armored Core started out as kind of an open world concept. It's knowing that it's mission based. It's kind of interesting to know that it could not have necessarily been, and that you could have just roamed the world as a giant mech. But
Yeah,
you know, obviously hardware limitations existed, and some probably still do to some degree. But it's just a cool concept to think about, and it's kind of unfortunate that they weren't able to make that work. But maybe it was for the best because clearly it spawned an entire series of games, and if it was open world, it might not have. So
I don't know if I would have called the original concept open world. I got more of a sense that they were thinking more like an adventure platform game, kind of like how Spyro, you can just kind of walk around the levels everywhere type deal. Um,
maybe,
maybe,
perhaps.
maybe I don't know, but I get what
Either
you're
way,
saying.
yeah, it's still a really cool concept when you think about it, and it would have been interesting to see. But you know, I think that they still hit the nail on the head and did a fantastic job of creating the games they did. So
They did.
that's it for me, Dave. What about yourself?
Um, the early history of From Software, I'd never really paid attention to From Software before. You know that their games aren't my thing. I'm not into mechs, and I'm definitely not into Souls like at all.
True.
So this was new. I had never heard of the Kingsfield series again. So it was fun to sit down and learn about a series I didn't know anything about, watch some video on it, and take the time to learn that they got their start with that. Also, didn't know that wasn't even their start. That's another one on the list of business software companies that decided video games were more profitable, and they were right. So that was interesting to find out too. All right. Well, that will do it. That will wrap up our episode on Armored Core. A little abbreviated this week. Like I said, I'm burning up in the studio, so I apologize. I tried to keep it brief. Next week, though, before I go into next week, Rob, is there anything you'd like to add to today's episode?
As always, just want to take one quick moment to say thanks so much to everyone for listening. It means the world to us, and we hope you enjoy and get a little chance of learning.
So true. All right, well, fellow mech pilots, that wraps up our deep dive into the world of Armored Core and the fascinating history of From Software. We hope that you enjoyed this mechanized trip down memory card lane and learned something new about the intricate world of customizable mechs. Next week, though, we're stepping away from the battlefields and heading back to the living rooms of the 1980s. Dust off your zapper and blow into those cartridges because we're going to explore the legendary history of the Nintendo Entertainment System. We'll uncover how this revolutionary console saved the video game industry and cemented Nintendo's place in gaming history. So join us again next week as we jump down the warp pipe of nostalgia and celebrate the console that changed it all on yet another trip down memory card lane. Do the thing.
Scooby Doo Dum 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 Mech War.